I know it's the dead of the off season, but we do have spring practice going on, spring games coming up in a couple of weeks, and we can talk about some actual games if you want. Not games being played now, games being played next fall, but our good buddies over at FanDuel have released some lines for some games this coming up season. And man, I can tell you right now, some people are going to be too happy when we start to go over this here. Turns out I'm not the only one who is who's not expecting too much from Sunbelt Billy and the Florida Gators. Wow, would you believe me if I told you that Florida is currently an 8-point underdog on the road early in the year at Utah? That's right, Utah favored by 8 over Sunbelt Billy and the Florida Gators. They've got some interesting games on here. Some lines that kind of caught me by surprise. Tennessee, man, they've got a few of your games listed here that might be of interest to you. Of course, Tennessee's going 15-0 for the 100th offseason in a row. Let's run through some of these. I'll kind of hit the highlights. I'll give you my thoughts on a few of them. Florida, an 8-point underdog against Utah. Now, Florida's got to travel out to Utah to play this game. Florida was terrible last year, but they still managed to beat Utah at home. This is going to be Florida's first Power 5 non-conference game, a road game. First Power 5 non-conference road game outside the state of Florida since 1991. You heard me right. Florida has not played a Power 5 non-conference team on the road since 1991 when they lost at Syracuse. Now, some Florida fans point to bowl games. Those aren't road games, dummy. Some Florida fans want to point to neutral site games. Those aren't road games, dummy. We're talking about road games. This is Florida's first non-conference Power 5 road game since 1991 on the road at Utah early in the year. And the Gators, an 8-point underdog as of right now. Probably lose by more than that, to be honest. What about Minnesota being favored by 8 over Nebraska? Now, that's an interesting line. Now, Minnesota, I've yet to talk much about Minnesota this offseason. They do have some pieces coming back. Nebraska's been terrible, and they've got a brand new head coach, but that brand new head coach is Matt Rule. No stranger to the world of college football. I think Nebraska has potential to be one of the most improved teams in the country in 2023. Not a playoff team, not winning the Big Ten, but an 8-point underdog at Minnesota? I don't know. I would lean Nebraska on that one. Let's see, what else is on here? How about South Carolina and North Carolina? Two teams that, in my opinion, ended the season last year headed in opposite directions. Remember, South Carolina beat Clemson and Tennessee, 2 top 10 teams to close out the regular season. North Carolina started off hot with Drake May and kind of petered out over the course of the season. Drake May does come back there, and he's a Heisman hopeful, but he loses almost all his pass catchers, and they kept Gene Chizik as defensive coordinator, which I think was a mistake. North Carolina's defense was horrendous last year. But North Carolina is actually favored over South Carolina by 1.5. I disagree with that, too. I think South Carolina can beat the Tar Heels. Spencer Rattler comes back. South Carolina lost some stuff to the portal, too, but I think South Carolina could win that game. But right now, they're a 1.5-point underdog. Penn State favored by 18.5 over West Virginia. This doesn't surprise me. West Virginia is going to be absolutely horrendous again in 2023. They kept their coach for no reason. They just couldn't afford to buy out that Neil Brown, Doo-Doo Brown. He's terrible. He's not a Power 5 level head coach. That's been proven in his short time at West Virginia. And as long as West Virginia can scrape a couple of nickels together, this will be Neil Brown's last season. But that makes sense to me. I'm really high on Penn State. They should wax the floor with West Virginia. Colorado at TCU early in the year. I'm a racist. Yeah, I'm a racist because I think Colorado's not any good. Well, I guess FanDuel's racist too. Because they have Colorado as an 18.5-point underdog on the road at TCU. TCU is going to drag the floor with Colorado. Colorado doesn't have the talent to compete. Sorry, it is what it is. Cry down below. What about LSU and Florida State? A game we've talked about a lot lately, particularly in the last 2 days. I've done schedule previews on both LSU and Florida State over the last 2 days. Click back and check those out if you haven't watched them. Those schedule previews, I talk a lot about the teams that I'm doing the schedule preview on, obviously. But I talk a lot about the teams they're playing, too. So if you're curious on my thoughts on different teams, watching those schedule previews is a good way to figure that out. But LSU on the road at Florida State, who you think's favored? Well, I say on the road. It's a neutral site game in Orlando. Florida State's favored by 1 right now, according to FanDuel, over LSU. Clemson and Duke. Duke won, 8 games last year out of the blue? First-year head coach Mike Elko. Clemson's got a new offensive coordinator after a couple of disappointing years. DJ Klubnik's going to be the permanent QB there now that the ukulele is transferred out. Lose a lot on defense, though. Clemson's an 11-point favorite in that one against Duke. Colorado, man, can't get out of their own way. Now, keep in mind, Nebraska, earlier in this video, we talked about as an 8-point underdog to Minnesota, who's not very good. So they don't think Nebraska's very good either. Nebraska and TCU? Nebraska and Colorado, Nebraska and Colorado, Nebraska favored by a touchdown. Listen, it's got nothing to do with Deion Sanders. He can't fix that in a year. I don't know what it is you people don't understand about Colorado and the situation that Deion Sanders has walked into. Yeah, Travis Hunter is good. Cormani McClain might be good. He's a true freshman that's never played a snap. There's nobody else on that team. They don't have the talent to compete. Deion may be able to get the talent there over a 2 or 3 year period, but they're going to be horrendous again this year. They're a touchdown underdog at home to Nebraska. What about Texas and Bama? Texas nearly beat Bama last year. Some people make the argument they should and could have beat Bama last year. Quinn Ewers got injured. This game's early in the year again at Alabama this time. Alabama with a ton of question marks entering 2023. I've talked about that a whole lot too. But Alabama at home is a better team than on the road. FanDuel agrees. Alabama a 9.5-point favorite over Texas. Right now, if you made me pick that game, I would take Texas in the points. Of course, I think Alabama can win. Alabama can beat anybody on a given day. But 9.5 points, I don't know about that. If I had to bet it right now, I'd take the points and hope for a closer game. What else is on here? Texas A&M and Miami. Texas A&M's favored by 3.5. These were two teams that, my God, wallowed around in their own doo-doo all of last year. Just two pitiful performances from these two teams last year all season long. Texas A&M and Miami. Wow, what would the ratings be on this game? I don't know. They'll be in the toilet, though. Let's see. Miami is a 3.5-point home underdog to Texas A&M. I don't know what to make of this game. I mean, I do think Texas A&M is a more talented team overall than Miami. I actually like Miami's coaching staff better than Texas A&M. It's a home game for Miami, but what does that mean, really? Because Miami doesn't even really have any home games. Every game Miami plays is a road game. They don't have a stadium. They've got to get on a bus and travel 30 minutes to their own home game. So I don't know. Texas A&M favored by 3.5 in that one. Tennessee at Florida. Tennessee at Florida. How bad are the Vols going to humiliate the Gators on the road in Gainesville? Well, according to the people at FanDuel, Tennessee is favored by 6.5. So less than a touchdown game there, according to FanDuel. Tennessee on the road at Florida. Florida, like I said, in for a rough season. Don't get too excited, Tennessee, man. You're on this list a couple more times. Stick around. Let's keep it going. Keep it moving. How you doing? Washington on the road at Michigan State, and Washington's favored by 8. I'll take Washington to win by more than 8. Michigan State, man, not a good situation there, and I think Washington's a legitimate top 10 team. Hell, I've got them in my top 10, don't I? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, I've got Washington 10th in the Uncle Lou way too early, ridiculously early, pointless and meaningless top 25 ranking. Washington an 8-point favorite at Michigan State. Pitt at West Virginia, the backyard brawl. Pitt's favored by 1. I wouldn't take West Virginia against almost anybody with just 1 point. So give me Pitt and lay the 1. I don't see how West Virginia keeps hardly any of their games close this year. They're just a disaster, an absolute dumpster fire. Florida State at Clemson. At Clemson, that's important. Home game for Clemson. Clemson beat Florida State in Tallahassee last year. This year, Florida State's got to travel to Death Valley, take on the Taters there. A lot of hype around Florida State, but according to FanDuel, Clemson is going to be a 3-point favorite in that one, which is pretty much even, and they're giving Clemson a few points for home field there. That's going to be a great game. Clemson's a 3-point home favorite as of right now. What about Ohio State and Notre Dame? A game last year that got a ton of attention heading into the season. Two of the biggest names in all of college football, Ohio State and Notre Dame. Game ended up being a little disappointing to me. Remember that when Ohio State won 21-10 and people went, wow, Ohio State's not nearly as good as I thought they were. Or they said, wow, Notre Dame's way better than I thought they were. Well, then Notre Dame went out and lost to Stanford and Marshall, and people are sitting there going, how did Ohio State only beat them 21-10? Well, then Ohio State got road graded again by Michigan and humiliated by Georgia in the playoffs. So what are you going to do? But they've got Ohio State on the road this time. Home game for Ohio State last year. Got to travel to South Bend, play up underneath Rudy, and touchdown Jesus. And Ohio State's a 10-point road favorite over Notre Dame in that one, at least right now. What else is on here? Texas and Oklahoma, the Red River rivalry. The last year this game will be played with Texas and Oklahoma as members of the Big 12. They're transitioning to the SEC next year. Texas listed as a 6.5-point favorite over Oklahoma. Oklahoma's another team that I think is going to be vastly improved versus what we saw last year. Brent Venables going into his second year there as head coach. At least record-wise, I think Oklahoma's going to be a lot better than they were last year. But they've got Texas as almost a touchdown favorite. Favored 6.5 over Oklahoma. Kentucky and Georgia. Wow. In Athens, Georgia's a 24-point favorite. That's a theme. Georgia's going to be a double-digit favorite over almost everybody they play this year, including the neckbeards of Kentucky. Georgia by 24. What about Alabama and Texas A&M? Surprisingly close last year. Texas A&M was terrible, but they should have beat Alabama and almost did on the road in Tuscaloosa. Alabama's got to go on the road to College Station this year. They're favored by 9.5, though. Alabama is on the road at Texas A&M. Southern Cal at Notre Dame. Southern Cal only a 1.5-point favorite. I'm not buying that. I don't think Notre Dame has the skill level to keep up with Southern Cal yet. I just don't. Now, Southern Cal's defense is horrendous, and it always will be as long as Lincoln Riley is there. We all know that. So Notre Dame will be able to score some points, but this is another one. If I had to bet it right now, I'd jump all over Southern Cal at -1.5, even though it's a road game at Notre Dame. Tennessee at Alabama. Biggest win since, ever for Tennessee last year when they knocked off Alabama at home, 52-49 in a thriller. Got to go on the road this year, playing in Tuscaloosa. Alabama an 8.5-point favorite right now over the Voltard. Wow, that is not going to make the Tennessee man happy, is it? Nope. But the reality is, this is the perception that Tennessee has across the country. Bama's better than you. Yeah, you beat them last year at home in a fluky-type miracle. Sorry, not taking anything away from your win. It's great that you beat them, and you went on to have an amazing season where you didn't even win your division, but you're an 8.5-point favorite this year on the road at Bama, according to FanDuel. Penn State and Ohio State. No surprise here. Ohio State's a 9.5-point favorite. Penn State has not been able to get over the hump lately when it comes to the Big Ten East, and Ohio State and Michigan in particular. Feels like they need to do it this year. James Franklin, I've been James Franklin's biggest cheerleader, and even I'm running out of patience. At some point, you got to put together a season where you beat Ohio State, Michigan, or both, and actually win the division. I know they won the Big Ten in 2016, but that was 2016. It's time to do it again. Ohio State's listed as a 9.5-point home favorite in that one. Michigan and Michigan State. Michigan's a big favorite, favored by 16.5. Again, Michigan State not going to be any good. Georgia and Florida. Georgia only favored by 20.5. Take the dogs, lay the 20.5. Under 3 touchdowns. Georgia will beat them by 4 touchdowns at least. FanDuel says 20.5. LSU at Bama. Who's favored in this one? LSU beat them last year. LSU won the West last year. What says FanDuel for this year? LSU on the road at Bama. You noticing a theme with Bama? Texas is a home game for Bama. Tennessee, home game for Bama. LSU, home game for Bama. Don't sleep on Bama. I know they got a lot of questions and issues. Believe me, I've been pounding that drum. Their 3 toughest games are all at home, and Alabama's a much better team at home. Much better team at home. Alabama's favored by 9.5 against LSU, according to FanDuel. What else? Michigan and Penn State. Michigan favored by 1.5 over Penn State. Georgia and Tennessee on the road in Knoxville. Lou, if that game would have been in Knoxville last year, Tennessee would have beat them by 111. Yeah, I know. You say that every year. Like I said, 15-0 every offseason for 100 off seasons in a row, Tennessee, man. But this year, we actually do have to play Tennessee in Knoxville. So I'm sure Tennessee will beat Georgia. I'm sure FanDuel agrees. According to FanDuel, Tennessee is a 7.5-point underdog at home to the 2-time defending national champion back-to-back Georgia Bulldogs. Yes, Tennessee is 7.5-point home underdog against Georgia. Ohio State and Michigan. Any guesses on this one before I give it to you? Ohio State and Michigan. Last game of the year, the Big Ten every year. Ohio State and Michigan. Michigan's beat them 2 years in a row. The game is in Michigan this year. Who's favored? Michigan is favored by 1. Be the first time Ohio State's been a regular season underdog in a while, if this holds up. But yeah, according to FanDuel, Michigan is a 1-point favorite. There you go. That's not all the games, of course, but that's all the games, or the majority of the games that FanDuel has interest. They don't put out lines on every single game this early in the offseason. They tend to do some of the bigger games or whatever. But anyway, if you've seen the list, let me know what you think. If you haven't seen the list, but you're watching the video, ain't you? Yeah. Let me know what you think about some of these lines. Are they wrong? Are they right? How off are they? Which ones do you agree with? Which ones do you disagree with? If you had to bet your last dollar on one of these games we talked about today on FanDuel, which game would it be? Which game would it be? Damn, Georgia just huge favorites over everybody they play.